This is Arlington Weekly News' update number 11. Arlington's virtual town hall took place at noon on Friday, April 3rd, 2020, and went off quite well. The questions and answers were worthy of consideration. Don Hammond's Arlington Weekly News did not actively submit questions in order to give everyone else a chance. What follows is analysis and observation. A question was raised about the closing of the tennis courts. The answers from the board members were polite. However, some analysis and amplification might be helpful. First, this is a pandemic, not a party. The recommendations have been for solo exercising, not multiplayer games. For now, the purpose of exercise is to maintain basic physical health, not to keep up one's proficiency at their favorite sport. Second, consider the mechanism of the virus in relation to sports. In two-person tennis, the players are indeed separated by a net and are seldom, if ever, within 6 feet of each other. However, at the beginning and end of every point, they pick up the ball with their hands. When a few people toss a football around or practice punt returns, they may all be more than 6 feet apart, but again, their hands come into direct contact with the ball. Even in soccer, where the use of the hands is not allowed during actual gameplay, there are times between points at which the ball is handled. Finally, especially for adults, consider the example you are setting by your presence on a closed field or facility. However careful you yourself may be, the people who observe you might decide to have their own games. And it takes enough time for park rangers to merely patrol the parks, fields, and courts without having to step in and advise unauthorized people to leave. Again, this situation should not be treated as a holiday. Another very significant issue that came up was the curve. The curve refers to the projected path of the number of active COVID-19 cases over time. It has its uses as a concept in that it presents the goal of keeping new cases at a minimum in order to avoid overtaxing the available health resources. Here's a simplified version, an imaginary community with 100-person capabilities. The use of protective measures does keep the number of active cases within the capabilities of the healthcare system. However, this graph is not a surefire predictive tool, and most of the known charts make some assumptions that may not prove to be true. First, there's the assumption that the number of active cases must decline after reaching a certain peak. The history of previous viruses has shown that there can be additional waves, resurgences of a virus, sometimes in a slightly altered form. For example, the so-called Spanish flu killed more people in its second wave than in the first. In addition, there was also a third wave before the threat finally subsided. This graph just shows the imaginary second wave, more deadly than the first. Then there's the potential for complacency once the peak has passed. Here's how a graph might look showing the actual curve if precautions are dropped prematurely. This one is a bit extreme, but the second surge could also be a newly mutated strain of virus with different vulnerabilities. The point, however, is that human behavior can dramatically alter the trajectory of infections and is much harder to predict. One other thought that came out of the virtual town hall was the unfortunate and perhaps unavoidable conflicting advice. On the one hand, Arlingtonians are being encouraged to stay home as much as possible. On the other hand, Arlingtonians are being encouraged to volunteer, including leaving home to help a neighbor, or to help deliver food, or to perform service requiring some specialized skill. Both are good ideas, but the conflict is there. It was good to hear that more such meetings are being planned.